Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. Mostly you're going to be talking.
Thank you. We can hear you now.
Now you can hear me. Can you hear me in the back? All right. So, hello, everybody. I'm very excited to introduce you. I'm excited you're here. Thank you for coming to our little bookshop in Point Pleasant. I'm being rude and reading off my phone because the one thing in this, everything we can figure out in this world, printers are not one of them.
Yeah.
So I'm going to introduce Eli, and then he's going to talk, and I'm going to ask you some questions. And welcome to the Jersey Shore.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Excited. He's from Arkansas. That's one of our states for people that might not know that. New Jersey and New York people are a little snooty.
It's so true.
It's a real place.
Yeah.
He's a real person from Arkansas.
I played football down in South Florida. I don't know. I've got the
Yeah,
old,
yeah, let's
the
not
old
do it.
code. Yeah,
I think we don't need it.
And I played football in Boca, and so there was a bunch of guys on the team, a few guys on the team from New Jersey, and I never forget, like, first day, and I'm the only guy on the roster from Arkansas, and they're like, Arkansas, like, is that even a state? I was like, yeah, and then the next thing they were like, do you wear shoes? Like, is that, yeah. So
Not surprised. I don't think that most people in the tri-state area know there's
Yeah.
other states out there.
And
They know California's there,
But all
and
that-
anything in between, they just don't know.
Mhm.
So yeah, so Arkansas is a real state. We've met a real person from Arkansas. This is fun. All right, so I'm going to read your official bio, and then we'll just talk. All right, so Eli Craner is the nationally best-selling, award-winning author from Arkansas, where he lives with his wife and 2 kids who have never been to the Jersey Shore until now.
Right, today.
So this is fun. Hopefully you've had some good pizza and all sorts of stuff. His critically acclaimed debut novel, Don't Know Tough, won the Edgar Award, which is a very big deal, and was named one of the best books of the year by USA Today, also a big deal, and one of the best crime novels of the year by the New York Times. Eli also pens a weekly column, Where I'm Writing From, for the Arkansas Democratic Gazette. This is his 3rd novel, and you are a writer in residence at Arkansas Tech University. So we're very excited to talk about your new book, Broiler. There's so many things about this book we can talk about, but why don't we start by you introducing yourself, how you got into writing, and maybe talk a little bit about the writing contest you won that hooked you up with Soho, which is how I met you, and how I asked you to come to our little bookstore.
Deal.
So, all right,
Deal. Yeah,
perfect.
yeah. Well,
And thank you so much for having me, because this whole trip, my kiddos are here. They're 7 and 4. My wife is here, and we woke up at like 4 a.m. this morning, and then got on a plane, and we've done and they're like, again, 7 and 4, nap time still play into the picture. So it's been we did the boardwalk, we done everything, so the beach. We've done it all in one day. So I'm really thankful for meeting you in Ohio, was where we really got to just talk, and see that. But I have a weird backstory, a weird in that football was a big part of my life. From like 3rd grade on, that was the first tackle football season. And I went on and played high school, college, and a season overseas in Sweden. And it was when I got out of that, it's when I started to write. And I kind of took a football player or a coach for 5 years too. I took that mentality to writing. I just went at it, trying to write as many, I had about 2,000 words that I was trying to write every day. And anyway, I did that for about 4 years, and I wrote 3 really bad manuscripts. One of them was called American Football, which was about playing American football in Sweden. That was the very first one. I wrote 200-ish short stories. And the 4th manuscript I wrote, 200, yeah. And what I was basing this all off of was this Ray Bradbury quote I had come across that said, "You're not a real writer until you've written 1 million words." And so I literally, it was like a repetition in my mind. I literally was like, all right, well, don't expect anything until you get to 1 million words of prose. So I kept a little moleskin journal and literally would go through it, and make it so that I was keeping up count. And I wrote the opening lines to Don't Know Tough while I was teaching. Still feel the burn on my neck. Told coach it was a ringworm this morning when he picked me up, but it ain't. It is cigarette, or at least what a lit cigarette do when it's stuck in your neck. I wrote that like in between classes one day, like in a prep period at school, because I was still teaching. And it's really serendipitous because that book, as I started, that was the first, it was a short story. It won a contest in the Greensboro Review, which was published out of North Carolina. And then I started writing a novel out of it. And I got an agent. And that agent is sitting right over here, Rick Pascacello. And so Rick and I worked on that book for about a year, and I'll never forget, Rick was wise enough, he could see the tea leaves enough, that he didn't go out and burn. It was that time where like we were in between Harry Crews and Larry Brown and all that kind of grit lit stuff. And so that book we never really went out wide with it. And then Rick got out of agenting and we went back. I went back to agenting, sending it back out. And long story short, the way I finally got in was what you mentioned, which was a contest, an unagented contest where you could send the book in, and I sent it to Soho Crime, and lo and behold, it was hosted by Peter Lovesey. He was the one who made the final call, which if you don't know him, he's a British author, and he is the kindest man. The whole reason that contest even happened is because 50 years prior, he had won a first writing contest, and they were wanting to do a 50-year anniversary for him, and they wanted to throw a big party. But instead of throwing a party, he was like, no, let's take all the money y'all would have put into this gala or whatever it is, and let's host another contest, like a one-time contest. So they narrowed it down to 3 manuscripts, and how in the world Don't Know Tough, this Arkansas, very heavily Arkansas book about high school football, written in a very heavy Arkansas dialect, at least half of it. How he chose that book, I'll never know. But the farther I've gotten into it, when we look back, Peter's first novel, which won that contest, was called Wobble to Death, and it was also a sports-based novel because it was about a long-distance walking competition. And so you just literally walked until you dropped, and it was a whodunit mystery based in this world where somebody actually died and they were all still walking. All the suspects are still out there on the track, And Peter was also a teacher. He was a high school, like public school teacher in the UK. He was also 34, which was the exact age I was when Don't Know Tough. So there were all these very kind of like powerful details, and so that's how I got into it. That's where it all came from for me.
I'm looking up how old Peter Lovesey is now. I feel like he's 80.
He's in his 80s, I would think.
Very close to 90 probably. One of the loveliest men ever, and has written, I don't even know, he's 87, still writing. I think he has his final book coming out in the fall.
Yeah.
So the fact that you have a Peter Lovesey connection is just, he's one of my favorites. He's one of the most amazing people I've ever met. And I love that you're with Soho, and they've got a lot of authors, and they talk so highly of you. So we got to meet at the Public Library Association, which was fun. So I'm happy that you're here, and I'm not surprised actually that you won, because I think the voice that you have is different. I think a lot of voices that are out there right now are very, very similar. And it's hard to remember what book you're reading sometimes because they're very similar. So I'm not surprised, because I think you have a completely different voice, and I think you're such a good writer. So with this book, maybe I thought one of the things you had mentioned earlier was the Johnny Cash connection. I'm a huge Johnny Cash fan, so anytime people want to talk about Johnny Cash, I want to listen. And he did come here to New Jersey with his wife and kids, so he had to bring them the stroller and not his guitar. So we'll forgive you if you need a stroller. But it would be fun to hear you play. But if you want to tell us a little bit about the Johnny Cash connection and the rights, and I love how you're just writing, and you're not like out there and successful enough to know all the like ins and outs of the rights and the permissions, but you take Ring of Fire, which is a wonderful song, and you're like, I'm going with it. So just maybe that's a fun connection if you could just tell that story a little bit.
For sure.
So in the time that it took when I finished Don't Know Tough to the time that it took that book to get published, there was 3 or 4 years in there. And I didn't just like stop and wait for Don't Know Tough to come out. I kept writing. And so I've had Don't Know Tough came out in 2022, Ozark Dogs came out in 2023, and now Broilers come out in 2024. And I say all that just to say that I had drafts of these books written by the time Don't Know Tough was ever even published. So what Kelly's alluding to is this fact that when I wrote Broiler, I wasn't a published author, and I didn't know anything about how big of a pain in the booty it was to use real song lyrics like throughout your book. And so I'd woven the Ring of Fire lyrics all through this novel. There's a lot of reasons for that. One is the line, I fell for you like a child, oh, but the fire went wild. This book deals a lot with motherhood. There's another bit where the mariachi horns play a really great, like, kind of background noise to what's going on. And so I'd used the whole thing. And then my editor, Juliet, was like, when I turned it in, she had a lot to say about this book, but one of the things she said was, do we have to use the real lyrics? She was like, you realize
how much work you're putting into
what you're about to set us up to do. And so I was like, no, y'all, like, listen, I'm from Arkansas. Johnny Cash was from Arkansas. Like, so I did. I pulled the Arkansas card and like wrote the Cash estate a letter. But does anybody know who really wrote The Ring of Fire? June actually wrote The Ring of Fire, which is also, if you've read or if you read Broiler, you'll see why that's kind of also perfect for this. But long story short, we got him. We ended up getting it. It did take about 6 months to do it. So this is the point in the talk where I'd usually give the punchline of, and now I'm gonna make the most of that, and then I play the song. But yeah, that's how the whole song kind of played into it.
I have sung that song at karaoke, so if you'd like me to sing it, I will.
Yes, let's do a karaoke.
Oh, I have to ask, what would you have done if it wasn't? What would you have done?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, yeah, Juliet, she like told me, she was like, here's ways we could get around this. Like you say, this is, or you can even, I think there's even like numbers of lines you
Yes.
can use or
Yes.
something before you have to pay. So
Okay.
yeah, I
You're
think I
right.
would have done.
Okay.
So one of the questions I was going to just say, so first of all, I work with Juliet in my day job, and Juliet is the best at pitching books. So I had a question, but I'll wait. She says what your book's about. She adores you. We know when Juliet's behind something, it's going to be good. She said this book is about motherhood, miscarriages, and chicken. So everyone's like, what? And it is. It is. So if you could just maybe describe the plot and how, as a writer, those two things somehow work very well together.
Yeah.
That because not two topics you would ever bring together.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Well, and it has been the bane of my existence for the last 15 days, trying to go out and talk. It's one thing to write a book, and it's another thing to talk about a book. And motherhood, miscarriage, and chicken processing industry are all three really hard things to talk about. And that was when I first turned the book, again, I think it was because you're in this kind of state of ignorant bliss where you're not a published writer, you don't have an editor or an agent or someone in your head saying, no, bro, like you can't do that. Like, don't even try that. I had already tried it. I'd already completed the manuscript, and so I was able to turn it in to Juliet. And she kind of, it was this conversation where she was like, okay, like, I see what you have here, and you are taking, like, because Don't Know Tough is a kind of high school football book. Ozark Dogs is kind of a Hatfield and McCoy, two feuding families set in the Arkansas Ozarks. And then Broiler is different. Like, it's a different sort of book. And she was like, you're stretching, like these are going to be challenging things for you to pull off. She was like, you're close here, but we're gonna have to work on it. And then this was her guiding. I literally like wrote it on a sheet of paper and taped it to my desk. She said, and if you want to take on this challenge, then you are going to have to meet the challenge with love. Meet the challenge with love. So here's how the story came to me. And I really believe that the best kinds of story ideas, like, they kind of choose you. Like, you don't, as an author, just go out and say, oh, I want to write a book about this. Like, they happen to you, or they're around you, you know. So here's how it happened for me. I was teaching in a public school in Arkansas, in an ALE school. So if ALE is alternative ed, which if you would have asked those students, they would have told you this is where the bad kids go. Not always true. We had a high school with a couple thousand kids. My school in the ALE was an offset of about 60 students. They were there for all sorts of reasons, some of it behavior. But an example was this group that led to this book. My first day, I had 2 students walk in, go to the back desk, put their heads down, go to sleep, and they were out until lunch. Like, no matter what I did, I couldn't wake them up. They were out. Did this a couple of days. When they finally did wake up and they were like, trusted me enough to talk, I was like, what's going on? What are y'all doing? And they were like, well, we're working these night shifts at the local chicken plant. And so these were seniors. Most of my students were seniors. They were there to get like that last semester to graduate course recovery. But I couldn't imagine, you know, I remember my mom like waking me up, you know, and I couldn't imagine, because they would work and they'd get off at 7 a.m., 7:15, something like that. They'd jump through a shower and they'd get to school. And so I started asking, I'm a curious, I'm writing books, I'm thinking, well, what does this look like? They start telling me about working on the line at these chicken plants and how it's 40 degrees, really cold, because they don't want bacteria to grow. So they wear hoodies and multiple layers. And then they have these plastic ponchos. And I'm like, well, what's the plastic poncho for? And they're like, well, the blood and the guts. And they're like, but even more than that, they spray this antibacterial kind of fog, mist all the time. And this one guy, he was telling me about how his job, and he was kind of proud of it. He was like, because not everybody gets to use a knife, you know, in these plants. And he was really proud of this. He wore like a metal mesh glove on his left hand, like, you know, like a chain mail, you know, like what, and he and then he cut the left hind leg off these broiler chickens for 10 hours or 11 hours or however long until the input was done. And he kept saying that word broiler. And I kept thinking, ooh, like broiler, that sounds like a good crime novel, a good thriller. So that was where it started for me, was it like brushing up against that. But I didn't feel like I knew that world, and I also didn't feel like it was like a novel. I'm very focused on telling Arkansas stories, much for the same reason that, like you said, like, you know, like Arkansas is this place that when I go places, I say I'm from Arkansas, and people are like, Arkansas. And then I usually say, well, yeah, like Walmart's there and Tyson. You know, like I can say, that's usually what I say, or the Clintons, you know, the Clintons were from there. And that's really about it. Those are about the 3 things I can say. But I just didn't feel like that was a world that I could make into or it didn't feel like a story. If I wanted to like write an investigative journalism piece, okay, well, you can start interviewing these students and you could do whatever, but I was a novelist. So I put it on the shelf, and then this is really personal, but I mean, this is how it happened for me, was we had our daughter, and then in between